Are you wondering why a teacher or an educator should worry about conception and prenatal development? Teachers deal with students only after they come to school around 3 years of age. So, is that not the worry of the parent and the doctor? But in fact, many of the development issues faced by teachers in the classroom begin much before the birth of the child. This is the reason why educators need to be aware of the issues regarding conception, prenatal development, and birth. In fact, in India, our ancient teachings tell us a lot about not just the physical conditions of conception, but also stress on the importance of mental attitude in the process of conception. As the great Hindu master Atreya says, it is said a child is born from a mother, father, concordance, and nutrition. There's always a connecting agent in all these, and that's the mind. Culture plays a major role in the way a woman perceives and prepares during the period of pregnancy. In each part of India and throughout the world, people have different values, beliefs, and practices related to pregnancy and childbirth. The overall principle involved during pregnancy and childbirth is that the mental and physical health of the mother should be given special care. It is very important for women to keep their minds stress-free and be in a positive frame during conception as well as pregnancy. Conception. Most of the time, women don't know the exact day when they get pregnant. The doctor will count the start of pregnancy from the first day of the last menstrual period. This is usually about 2 weeks ahead of when conception actually occurs. Processes involved in conception. Ovulation. Each month inside the ovaries, a group of eggs start to grow in small, fluid-filled sacs called follicles. Eventually, one of the eggs erupts from the follicle. It usually happens about 2 weeks before the next period. Hormones rise. After the egg leaves the follicle develops into something called the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum releases a hormone that helps thicken the lining of the uterus, preparing it to be ready for the egg. The eggs travel to the fallopian tube. After the egg is released, it moves into the fallopian tube. It stays there for about 24 hours, waiting for a single sperm to fertilize it. All this happens on an average about 2 weeks after the last period. So what happens if the egg isn't fertilized? If no sperm is around to fertilize the egg, it moves through the uterus and disintegrates. The hormone levels go back to normal. The body sheds the thick lining of the uterus and the monthly period starts. Fertilization. If one sperm does make its way into the fallopian tube and burrow into the egg, it fertilizes the egg. The egg changes so that no other sperm can get in. At the instant of fertilization, the baby's genes and sex are set. If the sperm has Y chromosome, the baby will be a boy. If it has an X chromosome, the baby will be a girl. Let's see what's implantation. Moving to the uterus, the egg stays in the fallopian tube for about 3 to 4 days, but within 24 hours of being fertilized, it starts dividing very fast into many cells. It keeps dividing as it moves slowly through the fallopian tube to the uterus. Its next job is to attach to the lining of the uterus. Now this is called implantation. Some women notice slight bleeding for 1 or 2 days around the time of implantation. The lining of the uterus gets thicker and the cervix is sealed by a plug of mucus. It will stay in place until the baby is ready to be born. Within the first week, a hormone called human chorionic gonadotropin can be found in the blood. It's made by the cells that eventually become the placenta. Within 3 weeks, the cells begin to grow as clumps and the baby's first nerve cells have already formed. These are the biological details regarding conception. The development stages of pregnancy are called trimesters or 3-month periods because of the distinct changes that occur in each stage. Now, let's look into the development stages of pregnancy. Prenatal development. The process of prenatal development occurs in 3 main stages. The first 2 weeks after conception are known as germinal stage. The 3rd through the 8th week are known as the embryonic period, and the time from the 9th week until the birth is known as the fetal period. Prenatal development. The first stage, the germinal stage. The germinal stage begins with conception when the sperm and egg cell unite in one of the 2 fallopian tubes. The fertilized egg, known as a zygote, then moves toward the uterus, a journey that can take up to a week to complete. Cell division begins approximately 24 to 36 hours after conception. Within just a few hours after conception, the single-celled zygote begins making a journey down the fallopian tube to the uterus, where it will begin the process of cell division and growth. The zygote first divides into 2 cells, then into 4, 8, 16, and it goes on. Once the 8th cell point has been reached, the cells begin to differentiate and take on certain characteristics that will determine the type of cells they will eventually become. As the cells multiply, they will also separate into 2 distinctive masses. The outer cells will eventually become the placenta, while the inner cells will form the embryo. Cell division continues at a rapid rate, and the cells then develop into what is known as blastocyst. The blastocyst is made of 3 layers: ectoderm, which will become the skin and nervous system; endoderm, which will become the digestive and respiratory system; mesoderm, which will become the muscle and skeletal systems. Finally, the blastocyst arrives at the uterus and attaches to the uterine wall, a process called as implantation. Implantation occurs when the cells nestle into the uterine lining and rupture tiny blood vessels. The connective web of blood vessels and membranes that forms between them will provide nourishment for the developing being for the next 9 months. Implantation is not always an automatic and surefire process. Researchers estimate that approximately 58% of all natural conceptions never become properly implanted in the uterus, which results in a new life ending before the mother is even aware that she is pregnant. When implantation is successful, a single sperm succeeds in penetrating the egg. About 20 hours later, the nucleus of the sperm fuses with the nucleus of the egg, forming a single cell called a zygote. A change in the zygote occurs which ends its capability of splitting into twins, so hence singularity is achieved. Pregnancy begins when and if the zygote implants in the woman's uterus. At this point, hormonal changes stop a woman's normal menstrual cycle and cause a whole host of physical changes. The second stage, its embryonic stage. The mass of cells is now known as an embryo. The human embryo has a tail and bears a striking resemblance to embryos of other vertebrates, from fish to mammals. It has gill-like arches which will grow to form parts of the head and neck. In fish, these eventually develop into gills. A primitive heart, which generates its own electrical rhythm, is located outside the body, allowing the growing organism to circulate nutrients and waste products. Like the embryos of many mammals, human embryos begin without gender. The embryo is about half a centimeter in size. If a defect occurs during this stage of development, a miscarriage is likely to result. The beginning of 3rd week after conception marks the start of the embryonic period, a time when the mass of cells becomes a distinct human being. The embryo begins to divide into 3 layers, each of which will become an important body system. Approximately 22 days after conception, the neural tube forms. This tube will later develop into the central nervous system, including the spinal cord and the brain. Around the 4th week, the head begins to form, quickly followed by the eyes, the nose, ears, and then the mouth. The cardiovascular system is where the earliest activity begins, as the blood vessel that will become the heart starts to pulse. During the 5th week, buds that will form the arms and legs appear. By the time the 8th week of development has been reached, the embryo has all of the basic organs and parts except those of the sex organs. It even has knees and elbows, At this point, the embryo's weight is just 1 gram and is about 1 inch in length. Once cell differentiation is mostly complete, the embryo enters the next stage and becomes a fetus. This period of development begins during the 9th week and lasts until birth. The fetus has the primitive beginnings of most of the major body organs. Organ functions have not yet developed. The heart is beginning to form the typical 4-chambered structure of mammals. The fetus moves by reflex. No brain waves yet exist. The developing eyes start to move from sides of the head toward the front, the position for a primate. The tail has disappeared. The fetus has begun to look human with a rudimentary face, limbs, hands, and feet. It is structurally immature and functionally quite limited. It weighs 1/30th of an ounce, that is 1 gram, and is about 3 centimeters long. About 70% of abortions have taken place by this point. Third stage, the fetal stage. At 12 weeks gestation, the second trimester of pregnancy begins. External genital organs begin to differentiate. More kinds of reflex movements appear. The brain is not yet well enough organized to control movements or form even the most basic perceptions. It will not be for some time. At 16 weeks gestation, the body of the fetus grows dramatically. It weighs about 6 ounces. Its organs continue to grow and differentiate. It has no awareness because a part of the brain that deals with thought and perception, called the neocortex, has not yet begun to develop the necessary interconnections. The pregnant women will soon begin to feel the fetus movement for the first time. At 20 weeks gestation, the rate of fetal growth becomes slower. Its internal organs continue to mature. The lungs remain immature. The eyelids are completely fused. In the fetal brain, the first few synapses or connections begin to form among the nerve cells in the neocortex, with the greatest part of the process of interconnection yet to follow. At 28 weeks gestation, the eyes are open. The body begins to fatten. The greatest degree of interconnection of the neocortex of the brain begins rather abruptly at about the 28th week. Fetal wakefulness and sleep periods begin to appear. Brain wave, that is EEG patterns, are about to change. This point has been called the onset of cognitive awareness or brain life. The lungs are maturing, which increases the chances of survival in the event of premature delivery. The early body systems and structures established in the embryonic stage continue to develop. During the third month of gestation, the sex organs begin to differentiate, and by the end of the month, all parts of the body will be formed. At this point, the fetus weighs around 3 ounces. The end of the third month also marks the end of the first trimester of pregnancy. So, during the second trimester or months 4 through 6, the heartbeat grows stronger and other body systems become further developed. Fingernails, hair, eyelashes, and toenails form. Most noticeably, the fetus increases quite dramatically in size, increasing about 6 times in size. The brain and the central nervous system also become responsive during the second trimester. Around 28 weeks, the brain starts to mature much faster with activity that greatly resembles that of a sleeping newborn. During period from 7 months until birth, the fetus continues to develop, put on weight, and prepare for life outside the womb. The lungs begin to expand and contract, preparing the muscles for breathing. While prenatal development usually follows this normal pattern, there are times when problems or deviations occur. Birth. The process of childbirth starts weeks before the mother feels her first contraction. Her body will be preparing for the upcoming event in several ways. The first of these events may be an increase of circulating blood volume, which can be recognized by mild or moderate swelling. Her body is designed to prepare for the blood loss after birth by providing her with more blood before labor begins. Because the blood must be held somewhere, the body will increase the capacity of the circulatory system by swelling tissues. Another event is the increase of irregular rhythmic contractions known as Braxton Hicks. These contractions are important for preparing the uterine muscle for the upcoming labor and birth. Muscle is strengthened by use, and these irregular contractions are effectively bicep curls for the uterus. Although some women are troubled by Braxton Hicks contractions, most find them painless. Sometimes these Braxton Hicks come at regular intervals for a few hours. That is okay, and this is called pre-labor, which refers to the work her body does to prepare for labor. It becomes real labor when the contractions will be less than 10 minutes apart, getting progressively closer together and progressively stronger. The mother may also notice that their breasts begin to secrete a thick yellow fluid known as colostrums. This will be the baby's first food. Although it's low in calories compared to mature milk, it's packed with value. Colostrums have a very high concentration of protein and antibodies from the mother's immune system, which protect the baby from illness for the first few days. High levels of some vitamins and minerals may further protect the baby and may be important in the continued development of the heart, brain, and central nervous system. Some women recognize when they have lost their mucus plug. Others have no idea when or if it has happened. The mucus plug is a grey blob of mucus that closes the mother's cervix to protect the uterus during pregnancy. Another signal of impending labor is what is termed bloody show. This is blood-tinged mucus from the cervix as it thins and dilates. The mother may begin to notice that over the last few hours, her Braxton Hicks contractions are getting closer together and lasting a little longer. She may also find her body is clearing itself with a mild diarrheal. These should be indications too she is probably moving into true labor. It can be very normal to start early labor, have it stop, and then have it start again in about 48 hours. Ideally, the contractions will get progressively longer, stronger, and closer together. These contractions will help align the baby properly and push the baby and the bag of waters against the cervix to stretch it around the baby's head. Therefore, we see that birth is a multi-stage process. The fetus leaves the woman's body, comes into the world, breathes for the first time, uses new senses and organs, and exists independent of its mother. When a baby is born, its voice is heard. To conclude, we already discussed why it is important for educators to know about these facts. Often in the course of our work, we are in contact with women who are going through the process of conception and childbirth. What is the advice we can give them as educators? It is only when the biological and the mental frame of the mother and child are healthy before, during, and after birth that we educators get to see a healthy child in our classes when they are 3 years old. That is why it's important for us to know about the important facts regarding conception and birth. So when you speak to parents and pregnant women, you should tell them that pregnancy should not be considered only a 9-month journey, but a year-long journey, a beautiful journey. Knowing that the first few weeks of pregnancy are the most vital to the development of the baby, a mother should be healthy and avoid any harmful activities and substances around the times of conception.